Hello landlords, today we're talking all about unauthorized occupants and what you need to do if you find unauthorized occupants on your rental property. Let's get started. Why is it important to even know who the occupants are on your rental property? Well, the reason that people don't disclose these kinds of details to you during the screening process is probably because they've been denied access to rental property in the past. And it's probably because of the things in their screening. For example, maybe they've got bad credit, or they have a criminal record that otherwise is prohibitive, or perhaps they have a number of evictions in their past that would not make them a good candidate for you in the present. So why is it that you would keep someone who you later discovered has a checkered past that you would never have allowed in if you'd been given the opportunity to screen? These are the things you need to consider with every unauthorized occupant. Now, there are some landlords who would simply say, well, if I screen them and they pass the screening, doesn't it just make sense to add them to the lease? Maybe, but again, generally speaking, this is not a good idea because your original tenant has snuck someone in without your permission, without giving you the opportunity to assess who these people are or to judge for yourself whether or not it makes sense to lease to anyone other than the tenant who is there presently. Now, speaking of those who are authorized to be on the lease, what does your lease even say about who is allowed to be there? If you've heard any of my videos in the past, you know that I constantly urge landlords to list all adults as tenants who sign the lease. That's step one. But for everybody else, all of those, for example, minor children, should also be identified in the lease as occupants. And they should be identified by age so that you know, for example, we have 2 adults and 2 children, and the children are 5 years old and 12 years old. If you know these things, but you show up and you constantly see 4 adults and 3 children, all 13, 14, and 15, and these people don't match the ones who are on the lease, you know for sure you have unauthorized occupants. By getting these identifiers in your lease, you're able to prove, should it come to it, whether or not the people who are residing on your property are the same ones who signed the lease and who were authorized to take occupancy from the beginning of the tenancy. If you have a single person, one adult with no children, who wants to lease a home with 3 or 4 bedrooms, either A, they may be using this as a business or subleasing through Airbnb, or B, they plan to have a whole other crew in there. And so there's a reason to be cautious or a reason to be on your toes when you have this situation. Again, 3 or 4 bedroom home for one individual doesn't make a lot of sense unless they've got some absolute need for storage, or some other uses, maybe some kind of hobby that this person really needs that much space. But more than likely, this is an end run, an attempt to get other people into the unit that are not otherwise going to be disclosed in the screening process and are not featured as members of the household in that lease. And so you should be a bit suspicious about that situation. If you enjoy what you are watching, please click the like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Any questions or comments, I personally review those every single day and would be happy to answer your questions. You can also follow us on Instagram and now on TikTok as well. If you haven't joined our Facebook group, Texas Landlords, and you are a landlord who owns property in Texas, we welcome you to join us there. Another point of suspicion comes during the tenancy. Whenever you visit the property and the only tenant who signed is never around, someone else is always around. If that's the case, then again, it could be that they themselves never occupied the space and never intended to. We have this happen where grandma might sign the lease, but her grandchild and their spouse actually occupy the lease. And whenever you visit, grandma is always out on some errand or is maybe visiting other family members, but can never, ever, ever be found. And it's really because grandma doesn't live there. The grandkids do. And again, they were shielded from you with grandma's credit history, her employment record, grandma's eviction history, which is 0. So this is a problem again, because people who otherwise didn't qualify are now living on your property, and technically grandma has committed fraud. So understand what your lease has to say about subleasing, whether your permission is required before your tenant subleases to another tenant. That's generally the case. Or what does your lease have to say about short-term leasing, like an Airbnb? You may live in a homeowners association that disallows it altogether if your tenant is conducting short-term vacation rentals like this. They may be violating your HOA covenants, and now the HOA is going to start sending you letters as the owner of the property to cease and desist. Make sure that your lease is clear whether or not this is allowed. You may be comfortable with it, but you're going to want to make sure that your insurance provider is comfortable with this, because now you start going to a different area in terms of invitees and people who are protected and whose actions are covered under your insurance policies. You don't want to create a situation where your own insurance has been invalidated because of the people who are occupying the space. Certainly, if these are unauthorized occupants, you can take steps to remove these tenants through the eviction process. But if you are allowing this, make sure that you're allowing it in a way that actually makes sense for you, and make sure that you're protected, including through your insurance provider. So how can you tell for sure whether or not you have an unauthorized occupant on the premises? Well, one easy way is through inspections. I suggest regular inspections, at least 2 during a 12-month span. This should inform you pretty well of whether or not this is a regular tenancy or whether or not something different is going on. But if you are on the property at least twice a year, you at least get an opportunity to see what's going on the rental property. And again, if you have one single person occupying one bedroom, but you see all 3 or 4 bedrooms filled with what looks like children's clothing and a man's clothing and a woman's clothing, or that multiple people are residing in each of the bedrooms, that's a pretty clear indication that you have some unauthorized occupants. So a simple inspection can often be enough to gather information, so that you send a notice of default to your tenant, informing them of the violation of the lease for the unauthorized occupants, and give them an opportunity to remedy the situation before you're forced to evict. Another pretty easy way to determine whether you have unauthorized occupants is to review your security camera footage. You are allowed to have security cameras on your property, certainly not on the inside. That would probably violate your tenant's privacy, but you're allowed to have cameras on the outside of your property, monitoring the entrances and the exits of the property, particularly as a mechanism to ward off burglars, or in this case, to monitor who is in fact occupying the residence. Again, that's not your primary concern when it comes to security, but it is one of the things that you can utilize as a basis of determining who actually resides on the property. Another easy thing for you is simply to talk to your neighbors. Make sure you establish good relationships with those people who live around your rental property, so that if at some time you have to ask, what's going on over there? I understood that only one person was living here. Do you regularly see multiple people here? Or I understood that this person was living here. Have you ever seen them before? You may be shocked to find out just how well your neighbors know your tenants and just how much they know about them. And if it turns out that they're describing a completely different set of people that have occupied than those who actually signed the lease, it may be time to issue that notice of default to your tenant because of the presence of unauthorized occupants. When it comes to landlording, your rental property is your most valuable asset. If you've come upon an occasion with unauthorized occupants, it's important for you to address that quickly with notices of default and eventually with a notice to vacate if it comes to that, where you need to start the eviction process for someone who's in violation of the occupancy provisions of your lease. I hope you found this video helpful. YouTube seems to think that this video right here will also be helpful for you, as are the many other videos that you'll find on this channel. And until next time, landlords, happy leasing.